All right, so for our last video here, we're just going to look at a few of the different property modifiers for a selected object or element on screen. So these are, again, kind of another way to change or modify the shape, an existing shape. I like to think of them as 3D filters, ultimately, that you can stack and add to a selected object. So I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do it with a different shape turned on screen. So I'm just going to get rid of this crazy ribbon thing for a minute and delete it. And I'm going to add, make sure you're in object mode. And I'm going to go down to add, and I'm going to go to mesh, and I'm going to add the monkey to the scene. Again, remember the model will appear wherever your little 3D red and white cursor is currently on screen, this little thing that I'm clicking out here with my right clicker. So sometimes you have to be sensitive to wherever that thing is to make sure your model appears somewhere reasonable. But I'm going to just move my monkey into the center of my screen and rotate it around to make sure I can see it, or actually rotate this screen around so I can see it. Okay. So this monkey, this is Suzanne. Everybody say hi to Suzanne. Or don't. That's okay. It's awkward. It's awkward, I know. Okay, so just making sure everyone's listening. All right. So what we're going to do is have our monkey highlighted in object mode, and then we're going to go over to the properties panel on the right side of the screen. So over here in properties, again, that's this little strip of icons. There's one icon over there that looks like a blue wrench. Click on the blue wrench icon in properties. And you should see an option pop up down below that says Add Modifier. So I'm going to click on Add Modifier. And what I want to do is I want to talk about some of the options that these tools can offer in terms of helping you manipulate your model in different creative ways. So the first place that I really want to talk about and probably stick to for the majority of this particular demonstration is the generate column. So that's this whole list that starts with array. And there are a number of these that are pretty useful for playing with inside of Blender that you don't have to do tons of work on to make an effect occur. So we'll start off with, we're going to start off with the one called build. So go to build. Now when you turn on build, you probably feel like, what just happened? Where'd my model go, right? What build does, this is kind of a unique 3D filter tool, but what it allows you to do is actually deconstruct your model and rebuild it one piece at a time, or section at a time. It is all controlled, however, you should understand that in order to make your model reappear on screen, it is controlled by the animation playback bar that is at the bottom of Blender. So if you move down to the very bottom of your screen of the Blender interface, this is your playback animation bar down here, this little narrow region under your 3D menu. And you have a playback button down there that you can actually click on, or you can actually right-click and drag the green bar that you see. And if you start dragging that forward to the right, and you may have to right-click or left-click, I don't know, based on your mouse controls, if you change them. You may not have changed them. If you didn't, then just hit the playback button that's down there and drag it. And as you drag that button forward, the object will start to appear section by section. Do you have, like, I'm kind of watching your screen over there. Do you have your mouse like activated for secondary, primary?
Yep.
And do you have, do you have for your user settings in Blender, do you have it for left for selection?
Yeah, my mouse has been acting really
Oh, okay, then maybe it's just your mouse. Use the playback button is down there. There's 4 of them grouped together that are literally playback icons. So keep going over towards the right on that lower bar at the very bottom. Yeah, and just hit play, and you'll see the object animate on the screen. Yeah. So what's cool about this is that you can incrementally piece what part of it is going to reappear or what section. It does reappear basically from front to back is kind of how it operates. If you look over on your property panel, you have options that you can change for the modifier. Like you can actually, on this one, we can tell it to randomize. Randomize is kind of cool with this tool because what it does is it literally builds it completely at random. Like it'll take it from all sides of the object and rebuild it.
So what's the purpose of this particular?
So this is kind of a way of deconstructing the model down into segments. Some people use this for animation, for making a model appear, disappear, disintegrate, reintegrate. For us, we could also use it for the purpose of being able to break down the model into pieces very quickly. Like having out a hollowed out model that looks very chaotic, it's not hard to do with this. So that can be helpful instead of going in and deleting every single polygon across the surface. So that's kind of what that can do. Again, it's a type of filter. When you're done in the property panel, if you don't want the modifier, there's a little white X icon listed next to the modifier name. So if you look where it says build, look over to the right of it, and you should see a little white X that you can click on to get rid of that filter. Go back into modifiers, and this time another one that we can look at is decimate. Same column from generate, so look for decimate this time. And what decimate does is that actually allows it to computationally reduce all the polygons in the structure down to simplify what the model looks like. So I can actually take this little slider bar that says ratio in my property panel, and you won't see any animation occur with this particular tool. Animation is specific to only certain things in Blender. This one is literally locked down to just controller changes. So with this one, if I click and drag on ratio and release, it's literally cutting down the amount of polygons that make up my final model. So the lower that ratio number gets, the more simplified the model looks. Some things that this tool is helpful for, again, you kind of abstract the model real quickly with this, but what it also does for character modeling or outputting to different software is that it gives it a simple structure so that it doesn't look oversized or use up too much megabytes to reproduce it on screen. And that's something we'll talk more about when we're done designing in the project. Okay, so we'll delete that modifier. That was decimate. Go down to remesh. And when you turn on remesh initially, what you see happen to your model is that it actually applies, part of this filter has 3 separate modes: sharpen, smooth, and block. And sharp kind of looks like what it does automatically to your model. It tries to sharpen off any rounded polygon structures, which you can change with these settings in the property panel. Like octatree depth will allow you to add more detail or remove it. Scaling will change the size of the effect. And if you go up to where it says sharp across from mode, sharp, these are the 3 different modes you can select. Sharp, smooth, or blocks. Go to blocks from that drop down. And when you change it to blocks, it literally creates kind of a Minecraft structure out of your model. And you can change its quality by adjusting either the octatree depth which will render kind of a bizarre looking shape like this, or form. So again, it gives it this very geometric kind of appearance to it, almost Lego-like. You can also adjust scaling to change the size of those blocks. So the smaller the scaling number is, the broader those blocks get. It tries to maintain the base structure of the model when you use this type of filter on it. But it's kind of fun what you can recreate with it. This is actually a mode if you design with, is actually it creates something that's very easily 3D printable, just to throw that out there. If you ever want to play with kind of printing like a Minecraft-y looking structure, it's kind of fun.
Hey, my mouse just disappeared. And I tried hitting exit and it's not doing anything.
Yeah, if you push this, sometimes if you push it too far, like the octatree depth, you've increased the model size dramatically,
Oh, and the computer just froze?
and your computer could freeze, or Blender could
Yeah,
freeze,
mine did.
Okay. Yep.
if you're not
Because
careful.
I'm hitting escape and nothing's happening.
Yeah, it's trying to calculate what you just told it to do, which may be too much work for the computer.
Gotcha.
So you have, with any control that adds detail to a model, you really have to be gentle with it, even if you're testing it. So even if I push it this far, like that's level 8 for octatree depth, and that's pretty detailed. That's really far enough.
Yeah,
On
mine's
this-
at 9.
On this particular computer, that's far enough. I don't need to go at a 9 or whatever to figure out what it's going to do. And that's at 9 on my screen. That's pretty far. So I'm not even.
Your 9 works.
Yeah. It does right now. That's mostly because this is the only model structure I have turned on in my scene. When you have more models turned on at once, your system does go slower, okay? So the less stuff you have turned on, the less Blender has to calculate and deal with inside of the scenery at a time.
Is there a Control-Alt-Delete?
Can you click on the apple up in your top corner?
My mouse just disappeared.
Yeah, Control-Alt-Delete. There's not really a function like that on Mac. Oh, it just did something on your screen.
Oh, it did?
Yeah. Move your mouse. Can you move your mouse yet?
Oh, yeah. Oh, sweet.
Okay.
Back.
Okay. Yeah, you may have to force quit Blender if you pushed it too hard. Sorry. School of Hard Knocks when you're working in creative software.
Yes.
All right. So that's what this particular modifier can do. So you can create kind of simplified forms out of a selected object on screen. So you can do some interesting things with that too. Another fun one is the one at the bottom called wireframe. And if you go down to wireframe, it will literally try to reskin your object around the shape of the polygon structure, so that what you end up with is like a hollowed out skeleton of your original object. Now it gives you options under the modifier to change like the thickness of the pieces you can adjust, crease weight, which is kind of neither here nor there. I think the only one that really matters is that thickness when you're playing with it, which can be kind of fun. But that's how you can make like a wireframe structure out of your model instantly. So it looks like more of a skeletal kind of form or a lattice work kind of shape. All right. Some other interesting modifiers that you'll see listed in here. There are a lot. I do want to warn you to be careful with them. Some of them do require like multiple steps to make them actually do something. For instance, under the simulate column, there's a section in there, one for fluid simulation. Really fun and really cool, but you have to set up the scene with multiple objects, and you have to tell what each one to do in order to make a fluid scene. If we finish this out in a minute, I'll do it separate of the demonstration just for fun. But again, those are things you may have to watch like a separate tutorial for to use. There's plenty of them out there for using the simulation tools though. But I would primarily stick with the generate column. Another good one under generate is the array list. So if you go to array under generate, array will allow you to actually make copies of your model inside of space, 3D space. So when you turn on array, it gives you a fixed count as your initial start, and you can do it to fit how many you want under count slider. And so if I drag out the count number, it'll just start pulling out virtual duplicates on screen, side by side basically. following the directional axis of your object. And the cool thing is that as you add them onto your scene, and I'm just working in one viewport with this right now, but as you add them in, you can actually adjust these other settings down below that talk about like different types of offsets. So if you use relative, they're all based off of X, Y, Z coordinates. So relative will allow you to slide the copies around. That's relative X. Relative Y will shift them along the Y axis, and then Z will do them all along the Z axis relative to their neighbor. So you can kind of make some fun duplicate type of process images with that. They also give you options for other fun effects like fitting it to a curve. So if you had a round curve on screen, you could select fit curve and then choose the curve in your scene, and it would wrap the selected object around that shape of the curve to change it from just being like in a linear line format like we're looking at. So I'm just going to go back to fixed count there. But that can be kind of fun to play with too if you want to put like a bunch of duplicates on screen quickly. For any one of the modifiers, it is a temporary effect on your object until you hit the apply button over there under your modifier property. When you hit apply, it makes the modification permanent, and it cannot be removed after that point. And that's not something you need to turn off or delete when you're just editing, but when you come to final stages of design, you'll want to flatten it into the model permanently. But that makes it kind of cool because it's not a permanent filter. So that's kind of fun. All right. Last thing that I'll show you with modifiers real quick. I'm going to add a curve into my scene to do this last one. So go to Add while you're in object mode. Go down to your Add button from the menu. And go to Curve. And let's just drop a Bezier curve into our scene. I'm going to switch my view so I can see what I'm doing. So there's my top view. I'm not even sure where this random circle came from on my screen, but I'm going to delete it. All right, so there's my curve. And I'm going to go to the modifier panel now. And I'm going to select from my modifier menu. There's an option in there that says, let's see which one is it, screw. So click on the one that says screw. Now what screw does is based on the shape and the position of the axis for your object, it will literally spin the object around in space on a certain axis from the modifier panel. So in the case of ours right now, it just looks like a flat kind of plate with a hole in it maybe. But we can change that, and we can actually tell it to spin it in a different direction. So I'm going to go over to my modifier properties, and I'm going to switch the axis black button from Z to X. And now what it does is that it spins that flat curve around a 360-degree point in 3D space. And so what I get is this kind of bizarre droplet-looking shape with it. Kind of cool. Other things you can adjust for this modifier that are interesting or can change the effect of it that are interesting are things like angle. You can click and drag on the angle option, and you can go from 360 degrees to less than that to make just a partial shape. So if I leave it at 125 and then rotate it around, what I've made is kind of this little partial looking feathery form that's hollowed out. And that's spinning out on X. I could spin it on another axis, like Y. If I slip it to Y axis instead, it spins it in another way. And so it looks kind of like a plate almost in a weird sort of sense. Other things that we can change are like the number of steps. Number of steps is just detail, how much polygon structure it has. Screw, if you change that, it will literally push the form into space. So I can literally create like a corkscrew kind of form. It looks like this. It's kind of cool, right? And that's all, again, it's all just based on working with one simple little partial curve. A lot of 3D modelers will use that to build like simple cups, bottles, or other sort of geometrically formed shapes that can be spun around in a complete form, or make these kind of strange corkscrew things out of an object. So you can get a lot of cool and kind of weird stuff out of that too. All right. That's really all I'm going to cover in terms of dealing with modifiers, and that'll conclude all the stuff that we're looking at in this particular exercise. Again, I hope that some of these tools are useful in terms of manipulating your own work, so use the ones that are the most beneficial. All right, that'll conclude it at this point.